for acquisition. He, along with other Navy and Air Force acquisition executives, will announce the contract winners of the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile. Mr. Money.
Good afternoon. Let's see, I am pleased to announce today the selections of Lockheed Martin Integrated Systems of Orlando, Florida, and McDonnell Douglas Aerospace in St. Louis, Missouri, as the prime contractors to compete head-to-head during the program definition and risk reduction phase of the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Weapon development. JASSM is a joint Navy and Air Force conventional long-range missile for the employment on the bomber fleets and will also be capable of being deployed from both aircraft from the Air Force and the Navy. JASSM represents an aggressive acquisition approach using virtually every acquisition reform initiative known to date. The Air Force and Navy working together from a joint program office in Eglin Air Force Base should be complemented for teaming together with all 5 contractors in structuring this acquisition approach and this program. JASSM represents a radical departure from the old ways of doing acquisition business and will become the pathfinder to the new way of doing business for the Air Force and the Navy users. We'd entered into a unique partnership to identify only 3 key performance parameters. The balance of the requirements represented a trade space for the competitors to provide a high-performance missile with our cost goal of less than $700,000 per missile. With me today to make this announcement and to answer your questions from the Navy, our joint partners are Rear Admiral Dennis McGinn, Director of Air Warfare, OpNav, and Mr. Bob Thompson, Director of Air Warfare Strike Programs from the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisitions Office. From the Air Force, we have the lead service in this joint program. We have Major General Ted Campbell, the Director of Requirements for Air Combat Command, Major General John Hawley, the Director of Global Power Programs, and Mr. Harry Schulte, the Program Executive Officer for Weapons. Mr. Schulte will now explain in more detail about JASSM, and then we'll all answer whatever questions you may have. Harry?
Thank you, sir. Maybe the first chart up and then. This is just a little cartoon that talks a little bit about why we need JASSM. Basically what it shows are the targets down here that are heavily defended, and then this is the kind of the area that area of harm where you could be shot down. And what you really want to do, either from a bomber like we show on the B-52 or from a fighter like we show on the F and A-18, you want to be able to launch JASSM outside of harm's way and send it in very survivable, lots of kill capability, and send it in to kill these targets without having the aircraft shot at. And that's the basic concept and the need for JASSM. Let me just flip this down. Why don't you put that on the other side if you would. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done in the ACT reform manner on the JASSM program. There was a clear focus on affordability from the very beginning of this program. Mr. Money mentioned that there was a $700,000 threshold. Basically, that was agreed to with our user community that said we need this capability, but we don't need it if it's $2 million a copy, which is what the TSAM, the predecessor program to this, would have cost. So we set a threshold of $700,000 per unit, with a goal of $400,000 per unit, which is quite aggressive compared to where we were in the past. JASSM is a flagship program for cost as an independent variable, which is one of the initiatives within the Department of Defense to try to focus on getting what we need for the fewest dollars that we could. One of the other things we've done differently here, and I think it's clearly the only time we've done this in the Air Force, is we've elevated the role of past performance in the source selection to make it equal to the proposal. So now, and I'll show you a chart in a minute what I mean by that exactly, but basically we had the contractors propose to us their plan and their design, but basically we used their past performance to determine what we thought their actual chance of pulling this off were. So instead of just listening to a bunch of promises in the proposal, we went back and looked at, well, what did you do the last time you said this? And how well did you do before? And it made a difference in the source selection. We had early contractor involvement in the strategy. We had our first industry day on the 1st of August of '95, and we've had 4 or 5 industry days and lots of one-on-one conversations with all the bidders in this since that time. A very streamlined acquisition. It was a small RFP. I think it was 119 pages, which is very small by standards that we've used not too long ago. Very small proposal. The whole proposal was only 320 pages, and in fact, the technical proposal came to us on a 5-hour videotape. We did not have a technical volume as you normally have on a source selection. We basically had a 5-hour videotape. He could use 100 charts, and they videoed it and sent it in, and that was the technical proposal. Very small government team. The program office for JASSM will be about 50 Air Force and Navy personnel when it mans up completely. It's not quite there right now. We also released the source selection standards to the contractors. They always knew what the areas and the factors were, but we went down one more level and told them exactly what standards we were going to hold them to, especially this is particularly important in the area of past performance. They knew what contracts we were going to look at. In fact, we agreed with the contractors up front on what contracts we were going to look at, and they knew the standards by which we were going to judge them. I talked about the oral technical proposal, and in this case we had no best and final price proposal. Technical proposal came in, we sent out, if we had questions, we sent out some points for negotiation. They would send the answers in. Once that was done, then we said, okay, now send your price proposal in. So there really was only one price that came in. I want to talk a little bit more about I'll kill myself here. What I mean by saying that past performance was half of the evaluation, think of this scale as here's the past performance side of the evaluation, and here's the proposal side. So basically the data that we looked at on this side was data that the government had. We either went to Defense Contract Management Center, we had Air Force contractor performance assessment reports, we had interviews with program managers from the Army and the Navy and the Air Force that helped us gather this data to evaluate the contractor's past performance. Now these particular areas that we selected were areas that the program office said were most important for the successful execution of the JASSM program. And so, how have your products in the past performed? How have you done on software? How have you done on aircraft integration? All very important things for the JASSM program. What about manufacturing performance from an affordability viewpoint? What about your cost and schedule performance? Have you been on cost? Have you been on schedule in the past? So this was half of the evaluation. The other half was traditional evaluation that you would see on a normal source selection. That was basically the proposal. Did you meet the key performance parameters? As Mr. Money said, there were 3 key performance parameters on this program. One was range, one was missile mission effectiveness, basically how many missiles does it take to kill the target set, and the third was carrier operability, those were the 3. We had other requirements that were critical but tradable for cost. Anything other than these 3 parameters, you can trade for cost in order to keep the cost down. These 3, if you need to change any of the ones and other requirements, you can do so, but we have to go back to the user and check. So is this okay if he does that? And then we looked at their integrated master plan, integrated master schedule to see if they had a plan to pull this off. On the other side, we looked at affordability. Affordability was very important, as I said, on this program. What was your average unit procurement price projections for lots 1 through 5? What was your mission cost effectiveness? That was a combination of how much your missile cost and how many missiles it took to kill the target set. So we probably pulled that together and said, what was the cost per target killed in a kind of a best value measure. We looked at the total contract price for development. That was both the program definition, risk reduction phase, and the engineering and manufacturing development phase. And then lastly, we looked at your average unit procurement price for lot 6 to 10. The program was set out as 2,400 missiles over 10 lots, and that was how they defined their average unit procurement price over those 10 lots. So that gives you an idea of how past performance was weighted equally to the performance evaluation. Let me just give you some results. Here are some of the numbers you may be interested in. This is for the first 24 months, the PDRR phase of the program. Lockheed's contract will be for $110.9 million, and McDonnell Douglas will be for $126.5 million. Now let me talk about cheaper, better, faster in our acquisition reform lingo here. Cheaper, we said we had a $700,000 max for the average price of 2,400 missiles, and basically we're going to get less than $500,000 from each of the contractors. To be more specific would be competition sensitive, so we'll just say less than $500,000. The mission effectiveness is actually about twice as good as our threshold requirement. When I say that, I mean it takes about half as many missiles to kill the target set as we had specified as a threshold. And in fact, in some cases, they beat our objective. Faster was done in that the source selection was done in 45 days versus 90 days or more. Many source selections actually take more than 90 days. But here's one of the points I'd like to make. We had the mission needs statement for JASSM was approved by the Joint Requirements Oversight Committee on 31 August 95. And within 9 months of having that MENS approved, we're on contract, 9.5 months actually, after a requirement was validated. That's about as fast as we've been able to do that, I think, on most major programs here in the Department of Defense. Let me put up these two sketches. You got one this side? And basically, we'll talk a little bit about the designs. This is McDonnell's design over here. That basically, both these designs, by the way, have an imaging infrared seeker. McDonnell has 2 warhead variants that they've proposed on theirs. They've got some pieces from SLAM ER for the folding wings. They've got some JDAM actuators. It's an existing engine. The derivative guidance set is from JDAM also. So you can see there's a lot of current existing components that have gone into this. And basically, they've leveraged off of some of the systems they've got on there already. On Lockheed's a new system, basically. They don't have anything like a SLAM or anything right now. Basically, they've also got an imaging IR seeker, integrated mission processor. Lockheed's design incorporates a lot of design for assembly and design for manufacturing techniques that would try to minimize the part count in a concept like this. They've got a non-developmental engine, also a Teledyne engine, low-cost flight control system. They can accommodate a unitary warhead and, in fact, dispense weapons in the future also. That's also true of McDonnell. That's kind of the pitch. Sir, did you want to take questions?
Ask these folks come up, and whatever questions you may have of the users or the acquisition folks, fire away.
Okay.
Good. Could you tell me about that ratio of missiles per target? Was it going to be 2 to 1 or 3 to 2 or?
I don't think I
4 to
can.
3?
Can I? Where's Chris?
No, sir.
I cannot. I didn't think I could.
The other would be what's the stealth? Is it LO, VLO, ELO?
I can't tell you that either.
I could.
They are survivable. Let's put it that way. They are survivable. Basically, the combination of we set a threshold for how many missiles we thought it ought to kill these 17 basic target types, and we didn't set the bar real high there, because there might have been some more or less off-the-shelf things that should be able to compete, and we didn't want to push anybody out of competition. But basically, through a combination of survivability and lethality in the warheads and CEPs on the seekers and things like that, we got very good performance out of the whole range of competitors, but also very good out of these guys. But I can't go into.
But it is one of the traits when you get to mission effectiveness.
What do you get
how
in
well you
terms
want to
of
be versus how lethal you want to be, and the product of the both.
what are you getting in terms of warranty?
Well, of course, it's early in the program right now, but what we're shooting for is we're trying to get a 20-year bumper-to-bumper warranty a la JDAM out of this. Now, we don't get a commitment at this stage of the program to do that, but through the first 2-year PDRR phase, we'll be having the contractors work on that concept, and when they bid at down select, that's when rubber's going to meet the road. We'll see what it is they'll give us. I think we can expect anywhere from the 15 to 20 year. If the competition works well, we'll get them both to give us 20 years.
Another question, the PDRR phase you listed as 24 months early in the program was said that that's contractor dependent. Are they both 24 months?
They're both 24 months, and actually that did change. We went out and talked to all the contractors. They were all in the 20 to 24 month range, and basically we decided that we're going to define it as 24 months, and then if you think you're farther ahead than your competitor, you can bid a shorter EMD program. So in order for the competition to be head-to-head, we kept both guys at 24 months, but we said, hey, if you really think you're 6 months ahead of your competitor, go ahead and do 24 months worth of work in PDRR and shorten your EMD program. And in fact, basically they bid comparable EMD programs, so they're about the same schedule.
Okay, one more question, this is for the requirements gentlemen. The baseline is 2,400 missiles for the program. Where do you actually stand right now with the individual service requirements for JASSM?
The Air Force is 2,400.
The Navy requirements will be defined as a POM 2000 issue. The Air Force requirement in terms of time is a little more urgent than the Navy's, primarily because of our development of SLAM-ER with an IOC of 1998. But as we develop POM 2000, we will be looking at our inventory requirements for JASSM.
Are the first Navy dollars still coming in '98?
Yes, they are.
The past performance weightings, did you look at comparable programs or all programs, or how was that taken into account?
This was, of course, this is the first time we did it into this kind of detail, but actually what we did was we came up with a little matrix on a relevancy basis and said, okay, because some contractor might say, well, I don't want you to look at this program. Maybe he didn't do well in that program, and we said, well, we can't have that. So what we came up with was, what kind of program was it? Was it a cruise missile? Was it something very comparable to that? How recent was it? It had to be within the last 5 years or we wouldn't look at it. It was better if it was sooner than that. Was it a development contract? Was it complex hardware, that kind of thing? We looked at all that and we scored it, and we asked the contractors to score it. Pick which ones and you score them, and they came back, and it turned out in very few cases did we disagree. So basically when we went out with the RFP, we agreed with the contractors on what contracts we were going to look at in each of those areas on past performance. So they knew and agreed with us. We had like one change. One contractor came back and said, I don't think it's fair that you look at this, and we took a look at it and said, well, you're really probably right. We weren't looking at that particular kind of a thing on anybody else, so we won't look at it for you either. And so we agreed in the end. So they had what the contracts were. They knew what the standards were going to be. They could probably score that part of it themselves.
Can I follow up? Let me just follow up. So it was relevant systems.
Relevant system. Could you tell us, would the competition have turned out significantly differently if past performance was not such a heavy factor?
You want to answer that, sir?
Let me say it this way. Past performance was definitely a discriminator on who won.
What's the rest of the schedule, and how long is EMD supposed to last, and beyond that?
As I recall, EMD is about 32 months. So this will take us to June of '98, and we'll be about 2.5 years beyond that for the EMD program. Now, I think it says at 99 the LRIP, Chris, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, with an LRIP decision in '99 for the first group. Yeah.
What's your cost per target killed?
Is that a classified number?
Those would be competition sensitive.
Would be well, let me give you a range of them then. Then they won't be. The real answer is I don't remember these two, but as I recall, they were in the 500 to $1 million category roughly. This is when you look at it, what we did was we looked at the target in a given scenario, and there were 600 or 700 targets in that scenario. How many missiles would it take to kill those 600 or 700 targets? And so a guy that was, for instance, a guy that was very survivable, very lethal, would have fewer number of missiles required. However, he might be more expensive. And so that's where this parameter came in. And so you looked at, well, what's the cost to kill the target set? And I think they were in the $500,000 to $1 million range overall.
One more question. What access to TSAM tech data will the two contractors have?
They've had it, and they will continue to get it. Everything we got is at China Lake right now. A bunch of stuff that we thought was the most relevant stuff we put at Eglin, and they all had access to all this now. So they've had that all along. I suspect they've already used whatever they're going to need of it, probably already.
Can you say at all where this puts the U.S. status with talks with the U.K. on their program?
Well, the UK hasn't made a decision, but you know, there were 3 U.S. bidders in the KSOM competition, and it was TI and Hughes and McDonald. So obviously, if they pick a Hughes or a TI, there's no cooperation possible at this particular stage. However, they could pick McDonald. If they did pick McDonald, then we would continue with our MOU discussions on data exchanges, maybe exchange personnel in program offices. Look for places to save money, maybe like through common testing. If there's a common subsystem on what they bid to the Brits and what they bid to us, we would look for an area that maybe we could save some money that way. The other way to look at it too is kind of in a risk reduction phase. If for some reason these 2 guys don't perform well in 24 months, we've got a couple of backups. First of all, we've got a SLAM-ER that's probably that we could probably go look at that point in time if this would not work out. And also, we would have the British program to go look at the end of 2 years. So if either one of these guys, or I should say if both of these guys kind of falter, then I think we've got some backups to go
But
with.
if they don't pick McDonnell Douglas, it's over.
Well, if they don't pick, if they don't pick McDonald, then direct cooperation is probably not possible.
Well, what out of half slick were they using? Is it, I mean, that I'm always interested in half slick because of its conformal design. Was there anything? Was that the commonality with half slick, or was it something else?
I think there is some of the body shaping
So,
would be similar. Similar is probably not the right word, but some of the ideas that came out of that, I think.
but that would be associated more with LO than, well, I guess the same difference. Could it be used as a conformal weapon? Is there some thought of that?
Conformal weapon, you mean a carriage on a?
Yeah, I mean,
No.
that was
No, that's not the.
thrust of half
No,
slick.
that's not the intent.
Okay.
That's not the intent. No, they'll just, there'll be 2 on the F-18 under the wings and 2 on the F-16, and of course the bombers will carry them internal except for the B-52.
I think it's safe to say there's some LO in both designs.
Yeah, Tony?
Question for General Campbell. How much of this missile is a change from the TSAM major combat requirements in terms of the range, CEP, and radar cross-section?
We didn't have a CEP requirement. We had a requirement to kill the objective target set that we laid out. And each of them are achieving phenomenal CEPs, both using seekers for the most stressing. As far as commonality with TSAM on the requirement, we changed considerably the way we did the requirement for TSAM. As Harry said, we only had 3 KPPs, and the rest of the critical requirements, the 6 others, were all tradable. So really, outside of ability to kill the target set and range and carrier suitability, there are no KPPs, and nothing in there is not tradable. So we were going really for cost as an independent variable to drive the cost down. If I'm talking around it, you can't relate the two because the TSAM requirement was so specific and so many different ways. We really went to industry for more innovative ways to kill the target set, which was, after all, the goal of either missile.
I guess a question for Admiral McGinn. The McDonnell Douglas bid specifically, is that enough of an enhancement over SLAM-ER for you that it's worth the fairly substantial investment?
Well, it depends on how their design matures, how their producibility, what the final price is, what its performance is, and we've got to keep in mind that SLAM-ER has not yet flown, so it will fly later this year, but it's in a nice position, I think, as Mr. Schulte said, for the Department of Defense and the 2 services to be in, to have this as a backup to the JASSM program, should that be required. So we'll make those decisions based on a little more maturity of the development of both JASSM and SLAM-ER.
I might add, though, that the SLAM-ER did not meet the 3 critical parameters, and that's why we went off with another effort here.
Right. It's definitely a SLAM-ER plus that we'd be talking about to meet the requirements. And for instance, one of them, I think, is length.
SLAM-ER isn't the 80% solution?
It's, well, number one, it's too long. Number two, to modify it to meet this requirement that ACC has stated, it's going to require further development.
Primarily in length, as General Hawley said, and we'd have to do something with a different type of seeker. Right now, SLAM-ER calls for man-in-the-loop with a data link, and this is an autonomous launch and leave weapon. So it would be, in fact, some sort of a peak cubed eye upgrade to SLAM-ER to meet these KPPs for JASSM.
Yeah. The House Appropriations Committee is recommending a $50 million cut to the FY97 budget for JASSM. Wonder if you could talk a little bit about what effect that would have if that gets by.
That would be devastating. We've got to go over and work that problem. I should say General Hawley and his people have to go over and work that problem. Now that we've got what the requirements really are for the contracts, we're working up the budget figures, but our first look says we need the entire appropriation in 97 or this would not be executable. So we've got to go work those numbers and provide them to General Hawley and his folks and get them over to the Hill and say, no, here's our story. Because I think that what they were saying in the language, we don't think you can spend the money this fast, basically. And based on the spend profiles that we've got from these two contractors, that's not the case.
So if it gets through, you delay it some period of months, you wouldn't?
I think that's probably what we'd have to do, yeah.
Or find some way to slow it down. But, you know, just in general, I think this requirement enjoys strong support on the Hill. It's bomber weaponization. It's a standoff weapon. We've been encouraged by many people on the Hill for this kind of a program. So we think now that this source selection announcement is made, we can go over there and work with them, and we'll see what the outcome is.
Yeah, as Harry mentioned earlier, by the time from the requirement to getting the contract let, we're doing everything we can to accelerate this, so it'd be devastating and be very disappointing to have the system slow down because of that. Over the long run, we will save money in that regard.
Can you tell us a bit more about the Lockheed Martin design? Is it based on any other weapons program? Or is it a completely brand new?
I think it's a new air vehicle. Some of the subsystems that are on there, like the engine and the seeker, is a modification. They're looking at a new warhead, new 1,000-pound JASSM type warhead. But basically, it's a new air vehicle. So there's some amount of risk associated with wind tunnel testing, safe separation, things like that associated with a new vehicle like that. There'll be some of that with McDonnell too.
I thought the idea would be to lower the risk and by picking a design which is new, it sort of like increases the risk over a system which is pretty well, for the most part, designed already.
Well, we'll see how that turns out after 2 years, but we need to keep the cost competition going. Like I said, we looked at past performance. We looked at their technical proposals on their KPPs and other requirements, and these two guys were the clear winners on the two approaches, and they didn't have the identical approach. McDonnell has somewhat of a new airframe, and a lot of their subsystems are close to being off the shelf. There's a new airframe for Lockheed, but a lot of their subsystems are off the shelf too, so it's kind of a different.
The new design enters in here. And that's part of the reason for having two. So we get quite all that drop off. One more question.
Do you believe that, or is it planned at this point to apply this kind of weighting to past performance to other major acquisitions like Joint Strike Fighter?
Let's see, in a generic sense, let me not speak specifically to Joint Strike Fighter, and that RFP is already out for the down selection. But I am very encouraged by this being the first guinea pig, if you will, of using past performances, and it is definitely a discriminator in the selection of the two winners. So we will continue to use past performance as a major discriminator in future proposals.
Can I just to follow up on that? How far did past performance go back? Was it just on their
5 years.
proposal?
Back to 5 years.
Back to 5 years.
On relevant systems.
No older than 5.
Forgot Lockheed Martin, what are relevant missile systems that you can think of?
Well, they had Longbow, they had Hellfire 2, they had the initial stages of JDAM as far as past performance and things like that. I'm trying to think. There's another one I can't remember. Those are the three I recall: Longbow, Hellfire 2, and JDAM were some of the ones that we looked at. They had some Lantern stuff. Now that was a little bit older. Some of that got to be about 4 years old, some of their Lantern experience, but that was complex avionics type thing, so it was kind of.
Thank you very much.
Pretty good to see you, Dave.